Greetings. I apologise for the long gap between videos. What happened is I decided to test which of my putters was superior, and in the course of solving all the problems to make that testing fair, I had to reorganise this room so that that was all it could do. I couldn't make a space to film things at the same time. So there will be perhaps a few videos about that process and how it went. And this is the first of those in which I'm going to tell you about the planning stage of that project. I'll tell you up front that the plans I made didn't entirely work out. But I do need to explain what the plan was and why that was the plan in order for you to understand the rest of the outcomes. So please do stick around if you're interested in this project at all. If not, skip this and the next few Quadcast episodes because they're all going to be on this subject. 2 years ago, in about the same time of year actually, I did a similar test to find out which of the putters I owned then was best, and the winner was this Inesis Decathlon mallet style putter in a statistical tie with this Costco Kirkland signature, very much not a mallet style putter. I didn't like that result, and there are two reasons why I didn't like it. Conventional wisdom at the time was that everyone had a natural putting style that was built into their body, and that would suit either what they call a face balanced putter. So you can see this one balances with the putting face pointing straight up, or it would suit a what they call toe hang putter. So this one balances, as you can see, with the toe of the putter pointing downwards. For that to be true, it didn't make sense that my end result of all my testing was that these two were tied, because they are obviously different kinds of putter. Now, I had other toe hang putters in that testing, and they fell earlier, like were outscored by these two. And I had another mallet style putter in the test, which actually placed third in a statistical tie with second place, but it wasn't joint tied for first. So overall, that, like, if the what putter should work for me story, that it's determined by my putting stroke, and it should suit either a toe hang or a mallet or some in between option. It didn't really make sense for though it was actually a mid hang half mallet putter that was third. So the results didn't make sense if within that framework. So like my conclusion, frankly, at that point was that framework of thinking about putting is not correct. At least for me, doesn't describe how to find the best putter for myself. The other obvious reason it's dissatisfying is at the end of the day, I want to have one putter in my golf bag that I'm going to use for putting, and having two putters in a statistical tie for best performer when they need a radically different technique for putting with each of them doesn't help me any making that decision. So I wanted to run the test again, and this time perhaps use different statistical frameworks and some different testing methodology to try and find a difference if there is one, and to get a singular answer for what should I be using. The obvious way to improve your chances of finding a statistical difference between two data sets is to collect a lot more data. In general, like if you've only tested 10 putts with each putter, then you're going to be low confidence that you know anything. If you've hit 100 with each, you're going to know a lot more potentially. In my testing last time, I'd hit 150 putts with each putter, and that still wasn't enough to separate them to the level I was looking for. And my methodology last time had been to hit 10 putts at a time with each putter, just round robin through them until one of the putters was far enough behind the leader that there was no real prospect of it catching up to get back into a statistical tie with the leader. Then I'd eliminate that at that stage to reduce the amount of putts I'd have to hit. But that process still meant I hit well over 1,000 putts that day. It was extraordinarily fatiguing, and I definitely felt that I couldn't do that methodology again and just keep going until I've hit 200, 300 putts with each putter, because I would have long passed the point where I was doing any reasonable approximation of what's normal putting. I'd be so fatigued. The other concern I had with that methodology at the time, as well as after the fact, was that because I'm switching from one putter to the next, when they do require different techniques, I'm surely losing a bit of realism there, because in reality I would pick one putter which has its own whatever technique that has, and I would stick with it for the season probably. Let's say the technique is out of the ordinary compared to the other putters. Doesn't matter in the context of one you're going to use all season, because I would get used to it. Whereas if I'm testing it in a context where I'm jumping from putter to putter to putter every few putts, then there's no opportunity for me to get used to a slightly odd technique, even if that technique would be better for me over the course of a season. I wanted to set my mind at rest that wasn't impeding me finding what would be the best putter for me to use. Now that creates a bunch of problems that will be familiar to anyone who's done test design before, but in case you haven't, I will explain what those problems are. So because I was alternating putters on the same day in rapid succession in the same environment, it provided a sort of internal implicit control for anything that was changing in that environment. So throughout the course of the day, I chose to hit the exact same golf ball on the exact same marked spot every time, so that if the ball was unbalanced, it would affect all putts equally. That was a control I decided to have then. But as I did the test, the paint starts to wear off the golf ball, firstly on the point where you strike it, and then latterly on a big circle around the golf ball as it continually rolls along that same perimeter line of the golf ball. So those factors, the changes in lighting conditions that happened because I was doing it under natural light and artificial light conditions, the changes in the putting mat where the ball leaves as the ball passes, it will slightly disturb the tufts in such a way that the next putt is slightly more likely to follow the tufts that were disturbed than to disturb new ones. All of those things were inherently controlled for and made fair by me alternating the putters in rapid succession, because essentially all the putters got to experience the same new conditions throughout the day. The other really significant factor is if you stand there for hours and hours and hours hitting the same putt on the same putting mat, you get really good at hitting that putt. And I could see this in my data that I was just, it mattered less and less which putter I was using as time went on. I was making more and more putts across the aggregate of them. So that was also inherently controlled for by alternating putters. Those are just some examples of the things that were controlled for because of that alternation, and that I would now have to design real controls for if I didn't want to have to alternate putters and do it all in one session, which I've explained why I can't do that. The changeable lighting conditions is why this room got reorganized to do it. I needed to use all my studio lights to illuminate the putting surface evenly. I didn't want to move them around between putting sessions, because that would be a change in conditions potentially that would be difficult to recreate. I did mark where they were so I could attempt to recreate them if I needed to, and so that I could check they hadn't moved, but still I didn't want to do all that work, which is why there's been no filming. I also needed to place the putting mat on the levelist part of the floor. I needed to deal with, as I said, the fact that the ball leaves grooves. So what I chose to do for that was to vacuum the putting mat, which upsets all the tufts before each putter's session, and also every 25 putts within the putter's sessions, so that if I'd hit a bad putt, all the future ones wouldn't just follow that forever. I chose 25ers and largely archery number. To control for the wear on the golf ball, I used a different ball for each putter. I didn't hit them all on the same, every putt on the same point or attempt to do that. I made sure actually to reorient the ball randomly before each putt, so that if the ball had a tendency to deviate to the left or to the right, if it was hit on this certain point, that wouldn't actually matter, because some parts would deviate left, some would deviate right. It would kind of average out in the end. And I kept and labeled those balls so that if I suspected any were weird, I could later open them up and see if the ball was constructed properly. And in the end, nothing in my real-time observation of the golf ball or in the footage that I recorded led me to think that there was any influence from the individual balls. So I didn't end up doing any of those things, but the control was there in case I needed it. The hard one, or the one that caused me the most work, was trying to control for my own improvement, because I was planning to hit the same part on the same putting mat now over 3,000 times in controlled conditions. Suppose I just hit them sequentially, whichever one I hit last is going to have an advantage, because at that point I am 100% used to how the balls react. I'm 100% used to how the putting mat lets it roll. I'm 100% used to the pace it needs to be hit at. There would be a massive bias in favour of that putter and relatively against the first putter that I tested. What I chose to do was assume that and also any other changes I hadn't controlled for explicitly would be monotonic, meaning that they only either improved or degraded, but it didn't sort of zigzag around in the course of the testing, and that it would be a smooth change over the course of time. Both of those assumptions are sketchy at best, but that's what I had to do to work out a control for this. And if anyone has a better way to design a control, I'd be very interested to hear about it in the comments below. But anyway, the control I came up with was I would pick a reference putter, and I chose the winner from the last round of testing because it's arbitrary, but that made as much sense as anything else. So this putter, I would hit the first session of putts with, record the results. The next session would be a real putter, a different putter that I'm interested in testing. Then the third session would be this putter. Fourth would be another putter I'm interested in testing. Fifth, we're back to this putter. And so on until the last session is also with the reference putter. Then what I can do is take the aggregate performance of the reference putter either side of the putter I was testing and compare the putter I was testing to that, to the combination of the ones either side of it. So doing that, what I get is I don't have a way to compare any two putters to each other, but I do have a way to compare every putter to the performance of the reference putter in as far as I'm able to get it the same conditions. It creates obviously a potential problem. If there are two putters that are better than the reference putter, then I don't know which of those two is better than the other, or two or more. And I would have to do some more testing where I pick one of the... So I'd be able to exclude the reference putter and anything worse than it, and then take that smaller group onwards to do a similar round of testing with a new reference putter from that group of statistically tied leaders. There are, of course, many other things that you would want to control for. And so some of the more boring controls, for example, were that I would dress as I would if I were going to play golf, so that I'm testing how I putt if I'm wearing those clothes and those shoes. I don't know if that would make any difference or not, frankly, but remove it as a variable by dressing the same every time or remove clothing restrictions as a variable by dressing the same every time. And since I'm interested in what's the best putter for when I'm playing golf, I should just dress like I would when I'm playing golf. That was my logic there. The other control on that kind of basis was I would place the ball on the spot and then rebuild my stance and my grip for each putt. So I wouldn't stand in the ideal place already set up and have an assistant bring the ball back and put it in place to putt it again, because if there's a difference in how difficult it is to reacquire the correct posture for each putter, I want to see that, because that's again part of how golf in the real world is played. And then there's one other control that I think is good fun and turned out to be hugely significant in the whole process, and that is that I inserted a null putter into the test. Let me show you the null putter. And here it is. Now, if you go and look on the club databases or ask the manufacturer of this what it is, they would tell you that it is a Titleist TSI2 11-degree driver club with a driver shaft in it and a normal driver style grip in it, and that it is really not very related to a putter style club with a putter grip on it and a much shorter shaft, as you can see. The reason I put it in was I expected it to be the ultimate worse than the reference putter point, to set the lower bound on what the performance of a putter should be. And that would give me some idea of the scaling that was going on. Like if I had fixed this 0 point from the null putter and I've got this point from the reference putter, then I could have some idea about like how bad are the putters that are worse than the reference putter. Again, for me, because I'm the one doing the putting, but how bad are they really? Are they really very close to the reference putter, or are they really a long way away and nearly as bad as not having a putter at all? One of the more challenging things about doing that null putter test is that for the thing to be valid, you have to take it equally seriously as the real putters. So I was really trying to make every putt with the null putter, and the results might interest you, but we'll get into those next episode. Next episode, I'll reveal some results, or the results I was able to collect, talk about why the plan didn't entirely work out, and what control I missed, and whether I've got an idea to correct for it. And we'll analyse the data I was able to collect. But until then, have a good time, putt straight, fill out.